know Elvis is dead, right? No, Elvis is not dead. He just went home.
I'm not a scientist, but I know all things begin and end in eternity.
You're a man looking at the world through a keyhole, and you've spent your whole life trying to widen that keyhole, to see more, to know more, and now, on hearing that it can be widened in ways you can't imagine, you reject the possibility.
I reject it because I do not believe in fairy tales about chakras or energy or the power of belief. There is no such thing as spirit. We are made of matter and nothing more. You're just another tiny, momentary speck within an indifferent universe.
This is your nautical lantern on the dangerous seas of darkness. Let's push off from the placid shore of the status quo and explore what's beyond the horizon. I am your host, BT, and this is Truth and Shadow, your podcast of the supernatural.
There are men, and then there are frequencies. And if you've ever sat alone at 3 a.m. with nothing but static on the radio, you know what I mean. Sometimes something comes through. A whisper, a chord, a name. Elvis. For most people, he's just a singer. A hip-shaking southern boy with a haunted smile and a taste for fried peanut butter sandwiches. But for those of us paying attention, he's something else. A beacon. Maybe even a transmission. You see, when you peel back the layers of glitter, the Vegas mythos, the Hollywood glamour, you find a story that doesn't make sense in the normal way stories do. We have a poor boy born under a doomed star, a twinless twin, raised on gospel and dreams, touched by something other before he even understood what it was. And then he exploded onto the stage, into the world, like a prophet plugged into a broken jukebox, singing the soul back into the nation that was spiritually bankrupt. But what if that explosion wasn't an accident? What if Elvis wasn't just a man, but a symbol, engineered or summoned, at a moment when the American psyche was splintering? A vessel for something deeper, archetypical. Carl Jung called it the manna personality, a figure onto whom an entire culture projects its hunger for divinity. A king, a savior, a sacrificial lamb in a gold lame suit. Because let's face it, after the bombs dropped in World War II and the world stopped believing in angels, we needed someone to carry the fire. And Elvis did. They say he healed people, that he could change the weather, that he read Yogananda, he flirted with theosophy, believed in reincarnation, and spoke of voices from the sky. He wasn't merely performing. It was more like he was transmitting something ancient, something bright. So I ask, what if he was the bridge between spirit and flesh? What if the real mystery isn't that Elvis died, but that he ever lived at all? Because when you trace the outlines of his story, it's not just a rags to riches. It's a descent and resurrection. It's myth Dionysius in blue suede shoes, Orpheus with a pompadour, singing the underworld to sleep. You think it's a coincidence that people still see him, that he shows up in diners, dreams, gas stations. Maybe he's not coming back because he never left. Maybe he's still out there, just off the dial, a signal waiting to be heard. So tonight, we're asking some interesting questions. Was Elvis Presley a mystic? Was he a myth? A message from somewhere beyond? Or was he all of those things and something more? Stay tuned, because Elvis has entered the building. Reality is fragile. It flickers, it glitches, it hums at the edge of perception like a vinyl track worn thin, something playing just behind the needle. Philip K. Dick once suggested that what we call reality is a veil, a projection, a false empire of time and space maintained by forces we barely understand. But what if that projection had a soundtrack? What if the hologram had a voice? They say the king was born in Mississippi, but when you peel back the myth, what you find is stranger than anything the tabloids dared to print. A stillborn twin, a grieving father, and a flicker of a color, a glowing blue that didn't exist in our world until that moment. A color from outside, a glow from beyond. And into that glow stepped a child, not just touched by it, but worn by it, a child who would become a man, and a man who'd become a mirror, and a mirror who'd become a mask. Was it a mask for something old, or something musical? He wasn't just a rock star, he was a signal. A transmitter of archetypes and frequencies, a living antenna pulling down madness, glamour, and godhead from somewhere beyond the stars. Joining us now is a man who's tracked the cosmic frequency through the mysterious life, the pop culture relics, and the memory of those impacted. He is the voice of Aeons, the dream weaver of the demiurge, the shadow prophet of the broadcast beyond. Miguel Connor, welcome back to Truth and Shadow Podcast.
Thanks for having me back. Yeah, I don't know if I can top that speech. Kudos.
Thank you. Today we're going to be talking about your new book, Occult Elvis. The links will be in the show notes. But that leads me to the first question, or maybe even perhaps how to ask it. Because it's not really who Elvis was. We all know who he was. But I think the question is, what was Elvis? And why did he appear when he did? And so I'm curious, could he have been a manufactured icon meant to awaken us? Because when you start pulling at the threads of his life, which you detail really well in your book, such as the mysticism, the twin I mentioned in the intro there, and the cosmic symbolism, I began to realize we're not really talking about a rock star anymore. We seem to be talking about myth in motion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what I try to do in the book is I try to offer different lenses to understand the rise and fall of Elvis and what he meant to post-war America and the world and our future in general. And from the ufology to Jungian archetypes, from alchemy, from the egregore, occult stance, from fate, all these lenses, because the more you look at Elvis, the more there's such a multiplicity to him, so many dimensions, and I feel there's going to be even more dimensions. So I give that, and of course I take a few stances. He's America's shaman, America's magician. He is the psyche of the soul of America and Western culture in general. And he is the Lord of the Crossroads, the trickster figure. He is that and so much more. So it's very complex, but once in a while you get these historical figures that take these dimensions, and forever we will be discussing them, and we feel their power and their experience, and they know that they changed the collective unconscious forever, and they will continue to do so. So in short, yes, and that's what I try to provide in the book, and it's really only the start of an adventure. I'm finding so much more about Elvis. Others are sending me information. I'm discovering new occult dimensions about Elvis, and the story has just begun with the book.
Wow. Yeah, one of the things that I was looking at, because I started researching early Hollywood, for example, and watching the film media grow in the early 20s, and how it was used by the United States government to, kind of move or manufacture wants, needs for the American populace. And so with Elvis, his fame came, like you said, this was, post World War II. So we're in a whole different era, a whole different generation of people. But it seemed like Elvis rose in popularity and fame as technology evolved. And I mean, we've got like the introduction of television, the rise of tabloid media, but we're in a whole different realm of just, we've gone from this era of, silver screen, silent movies to movies with sound, but now we've got this massive musical, I don't know what to call it, outcropping, and it just seems that Elvis was more involved in the new world of radio than people were interested in movies the generation before, with World War II or World War I's ending.
I think he was involved in everything. I mean, it's no secret. He knew how to leverage mass media, and he was almost part and parcel of that mass media. Television grew because of Elvis, radio, satellites, all that. And I think he was, he was an extension of this. We have to put on our historical hats on and look at the huge tectonic change that happened after World War II. From the ashes of the Great Depression and World War II came this mighty empire called the United States that history had never seen. And when you look at the graphs of technology and human advancement, humanity usually goes like that. And then with the Sumerians, there's a bump. But then with the United States, there's a bump that's nobody's ever seen before. It defies all logic and understanding. And after the 20th century, now we're level out. And now, despite what people think in our phones and all that, we are devolving. We're in a state of decadence. But after World War II, this explosion appeared, and there were satellites in the skies. There was mass media. There was UFO sightings. Highways were built. There were nuclear bombs. It was such a culture or a psychic shock to the world. What a change and what was rising, and leading those asking the questions of what happened, why are we here, we don't like this, we're not going to take it, we don't trust the powers that be, was Elvis. I mean, before Elvis came, the word teenager didn't even exist. He created a new demographic, and this demographic did not like the status quo. They wanted to expand into other cultures. They wanted black music. They wanted to see what was Eastern modalities. They wanted to look at different things. And they wanted things to change because they knew this brave new world could be extremely tyrannical, materialistic, and all that. And Elvis was there to sort of, again, as a shaman of this new generation, this new empire. That's what the shaman does, is make sure that, or the trickster, that the kings don't get too out of hand.
Right.
And yes, he certainly tapped into the mass media and made the mass media and all this new media more comfortable and accepted. And it was a way where the artist and the philosopher could start tapping into these powers. So it was a huge change. And I offer possibilities in the book what happened? Was it Nazi technology, UFO? Was it something snapped in the human mind after the carnage of World War II? We don't know, but we do know that Elvis was the Pied Piper leading us to this new post-war America. He both led us and embodied it, the good, the bad, what worked, what didn't work.
Yeah, there seems to be this line between I believe Elvis basically began what we could call the celebrity culture, because we really didn't have one before Elvis, right? You didn't have these people throwing themselves at anybody's feet. So you have this fine line between celebrity and, maybe a messiah complex, not accusing, but kind of observing this. And I think Elvis may have crossed into that line unintentionally, because what he unveiled, if you will. We've got fans weeping at his feet. They throwing themselves at his feet. They, seeking him for healing. Things that, I wasn't alive while Elvis was around, but I was around when Michael Jackson was pretty young, and people were doing similar things with that. So I can relate to that vision of celebrity, with Elvis being the king of rock and roll, and then Michael Jackson, the king of pop. So what do you think people were seeking from Elvis?
I think they were seeking a spiritual experience and another mode of self-knowledge that would work. As I argue in the book, rock music was never meant to be a form of entertainment. It was a spiritual modality. It was a sound therapy. It directly tapped into the more magical aspects of the blues, African animism, the trickster spirit, all that. Plus, it tapped into the experiential part of Christianity, gospel music, Pentecostalism. What people accused Pentecostal of being was mixing Jesus and sex. So it was two forms of light and darkness, left-hand path, right-hand path powers that really coalesce with Elvis and all these other cats, Little Richard, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis. These guys were more pastors than they were. They were priests more than they were musicians. And people who used to go to rock shows when it first started, critics would say, this is a holy tent revival.
Right.
Except, that's all it is. It's a possession of the Holy Spirit. It tapped into, as scholars have noted, into the ancient mystery traditions and Gnostic traditions, these sort of ecstatic, shamanistic rituals that helped you heal, that helped you know yourself, that gave you a sense of comfort and perspective to the universe. And that really was rock music. And what separated it too from other forms of entertainment was it was experiential, it was interactive. It wasn't just, Frank Sinatra over here and here's the crowd or here's the band. It was like, no, the singer needed to touch and join with the crowd and make eye contact and understand each other. And that's when rock music works best, as a form of spirituality. And we can all relate to it. It's, whether it's the Grateful Dead or Jim Morrison or, pick your favorite artist. You're there to connect with this shaman. They have seen something in you that helps you know yourself. They've seen some sort of trauma in you and they've helped you heal. And you're there in this audience creating an egregore, this flow, and you're all healing and becoming one for this sort of divine ecstatic experience to hopefully reach your higher self and be able to become more individuated. And nobody did it better than Elvis. I mean, he could, as you were saying, he brought literary altered states of mind to his audience. He liberated women's kundalini. He allowed men to be sensitive. I mean, it was such a firestorm that history has never seen that. And, respect again to Michael Jackson and all these other great artists. But Elvis was really the ultimate high priest shaman of this new spirituality called rock music.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that stands out is a lot of the things that he practiced or participated with, a lot of esotericism involved with the teachings from like Blavatsky, etc., Vivekananda. And, others. I mean, this was the time in the United States and America that this was big. I mean, it was all coming in. San Francisco was huge with Vedanta and a handful of other Eastern mysticism pathways, and Elvis was big in these things, and sometimes when famous people get involved, we could write it off as they're just being eccentric. And I think that that's not the case for Elvis. I really think he was trying to find something, find meaning in life. And his ultimate goal was probably to rise above, the veil, right?
For sure. I mean, he was ahead of the curve. That's for sure. I mean, he was doing these alternative spiritualities and studying the occult before the 60s revolution and the movement. He was going to Yogananda's ashram years before George Harrison was there to meditate. He was talking about, he never he never pushed it, but he wasn't a secret, but he was there having meditation circles, reading circles, talking to people about it. He was seeding it both in Memphis and LA. And this could be martial arts, theosophy, the Taoism, conspiracy theory. He was doing all of that. And many, as again, have agreed with me, he was sort of seeding it and opening the doors for this to come through. And there wasn't much in the United States, like you said, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, but the United States was still very stale when it came to alternative spirituality, Eastern tradition. The exception could be the beat writers like Kerouac and Burroughs, who were doing that also in the 50s, but it was still pretty niche. And Elvis really helped propel that. And like you said, he was driven to understand the larger questions of life. He'd become very disillusioned, like many celebrities, with all the money and power. And he was like, well, what's next? He didn't have the answers that he wanted through life, through his original religion, Pentecostal and evangelical Christianity. He didn't understand who God was. He wanted to know more about the afterlife, and he wanted to know about destiny. He wanted to know, why did I grow up poor and suddenly I became the most famous person on earth? Why did my twin brother have to die and I survived? Why did my mother die just as I was getting famous? What can I do with all this power and influence? Am I chosen? Can I do something to help humanity? And it was something he explored and certainly grappled with, and often tortured him throughout his life, like any mystic. It was just, but yeah, his spirituality and quest for meaning was just as important as his music. If you caught him, he would rather talk about metaphysics than rock music or anything else. That was always at the forefront of his mind throughout his entire life, even as a child.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Elvis wasn't a very good songwriter, if I remember reading about that. I don't think he wrote a whole lot of his own songs.
He didn't write any song. He wasn't a songwriter at all. I mean, keep in mind, he came from a different time. Yeah. This was before Bob Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel. I mean, everything was organized. You had the singer, the songwriter, and they never met. It's just the way it was. So, and he didn't mind. I mean, he knew that he could tap into any song that he chose. He always chose the songs except for movie soundtracks, and he could infuse it with his own spirituality, his own energy, and he picked songs that hearkened to the American soul, whether it was country, gospel, blues, that really tapped into the existential crisis of the slave and the Southern farmer and the one trying to make ends meet, and he just could make it his own and broadcast it in a way that really connected with people.
No, that's good. Yeah, I mean, it's you're right, and then I think he was not that he could play guitar, but if I remember, he wasn't proficient with it, and so that was something else with Elvis too. And so you're right. No, the ability to take and transcend, these little things like singing, writing the songs and then performing the song. I mean, that's what he brought the magic to it, right? And so everything from what I've watched through the years, it really seemed ritual. If I were to say his concerts were ritual, I'd probably not be wrong.
Oh no, for sure. I mean, from the very get-go, I mean, this was a sort of a Kundalini ceremony, Dionysian expression. And then later with his Vegas incarnation, then he's going full occult. You look at his outfits, he looks like some sort of space age shaman. And it's this a mixture of, Captain Marvel and all this occult symbolism like ancient Egypt and the Mayan tradition and all that. And he really, and he would start his shows with Strauss's theme, Thus Spake Zarathustra from 2001. And he carefully picked these songs to really encompass the entire American energy and all that. Even the way he wore his collar, he read a book, some theosophical book, and it had pictures, and he realized that enlightened people always had their collars up. So he's like, when in Rome, and he started, we think of his collars up was like some sort of Napoleonic or something like that. No, he was everything was spiritual, and he would do things like stop. There are instances where he would stop and do like a Tibetan prayer, or he'd stop and sort of go into this meditative trance. And even the karate stuff, we have to remember, in the 60s, martial arts was seen as very niche, not even niche, but an outlier. It was not something the American public accepted, or it was foreign and exotic, and Elvis sort of made it his own. Or his short capes that looked like he got from Captain Marvel. When you look at the old Shazam comic books and what he was wearing, same, and we have to remember, today we think as comics as mainstream, but in the 50s and even in the 60s, comic was real edgelord stuff. It's not stuff that mainstream or proper people absorbed. And Elvis he made that popular, accepted. So he was always bringing, again, this American shamanism, drawing from different forbidden arenas and making it his own.
Yeah, I think that's an actual interesting thing. I'm reading your book here, and I see that you talk about Captain Marvel, and I go, wait a minute. Captain Marvel is it was not in the Shazam world, and I was like, okay, wait a second. I had to go back and do some research and find out that the original name for the guy that gains the power, the kid, Billy Larson or something like that, anyways, becomes Shazam. Well, he's Captain Marvel. And I think that's a big, realization moment is going, okay, is finding out who Captain Marvel is today versus he was in the 50s.
It's quite a tangled, weird story, also filled with occultism. The main guy who promoted, or the great writer of Captain Marvel, big into ufology and occultism, and obviously the original Captain Marvel with Shazam, and he represents, Hermes and Zeus and all these figures, and a wizard gives him his powers. Very occult. I mean, Jack Kirby said he based Thor on Captain Marvel because he was thinking of the most pagan, magical person he could think of. So right there, in Captain Marvel, originally he was a boy, but he didn't turn into guy. He was invaded by this spirit. Okay, we're going into mystery religions, being invaded by the Holy Spirit or Dionysus, this tradition. But Elvis really liked Captain Marvel Jr. I think it was Billy Freeman or Freddie Freeman, because this was a handicapped boy who would say Shazam and become the superhero, but he still retained his memory. And to Elvis, this was the ultimate transformation from an outcast, which Elvis felt he was all his life, except to somebody with powers. And that really inspired Elvis. And and like you said, later on, Marvel took it over, and then DC rebooted it as Shazam and all that.
Right. No, that's true. There was something else that was really interesting, and to kind of read about this fascination that he ended up having with, like you said, UFOs and stuff that's going on. I mean, this is well past the Kenneth Arnold sightings. This is well past the Roswell event. And Elvis is seeing things. He's seeing blue-colored flying saucers or whatever. And that made me look back at this situation of his birth. And if we can talk about that for a minute, and then see how we tie that moment into maybe some of his fascinations with the beyond, the UFO.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's of course essential. And that's one of the threads of the book is the extraterrestrial space age Messiah kind of theme that happens throughout the book and throughout Elvis's life. When he was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, on, January 8th, 1935, same day as, David Bowie. Roy Batty was created on January 8th, if you go look at the Blade Runner movie. But he was born in this little shack and no indoor plumbing. They had to use an outhouse. It was a really hard birth on Gladys, his mother. And at one point, Elvis is being born. His father, Vernon, goes out to have a cigarette just to kind of get a break from there wasn't even a doctor or midwife there as family members because they were so broke and so poor. And a blue light suddenly appears over the house, and it's this light negates all sound. The wind stops. Vernon can't even hear the nocturnal animals like coyotes and others. And of course, he does what any normal person would do. He freaks out, throws a cigarette, and just runs back in. And somehow he has a memory wipe. Maybe was it the craft was dropping off the next. Whatever alien it is, alien savior, or as when you read these great myths, whether it's Jesus or Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan, there's always a story about some meteor or star above. And that happened with Elvis, but Vernon forgot, and I said memory wipe, but also because soon after Jesse was born and Jesse didn't make it. He was stillborn. And 35 minutes later, Elvis comes out. So it was forgotten until many years later in Graceland. There was Elvis and Vernon and some others had a extraterrestrial experience where these flying saucers flew over there, and they're like, "Oh my God!" And Vernon says, "Oh my God, I just remembered the blue light." And Elvis is like, "Oh boy, I wonder if I'm really from this Earth or anything like that." And he did speculate. He once told a super fan, was it Wanda June or Wanda Hill? He told her that he thought he was from one of the moons in Jupiter and all that. And she claims that his eyes were glowing and all that. But again, Elvis also liked to shitpost and joke around. You never know. And he often did say, "I am not of this world," but you could see that from a religious point, like Jesus in the Gospel of John, or some guru saying, "I came from another dimension." But that was his one of 3 extraterrestrial encounters. He had another one while driving from Memphis to LA to film a movie where you had, of course, the zigzagging lights doing incredible things. And he and his entourage just stood outside watching. And somebody, his spiritual teacher, said, "Could this be military craft?" And Elvis is like, "I was in the military. We have nothing like this." And then there's another one which he had in his Bel Air mansion in California, where he was standing outside with his bodyguard, and this light flooded the area. At first they thought, well, it could be a helicopter or plane. And then they're like, it's too close. It's right over us. It's not making a sound. This is not a helicopter or a plane. And it was quite a jarring experience, but it really wasn't, because in none of these he was really worried or even that freaked out, because he was steeped in ufology. He had a very sophisticated view of UFOs. Remember, in the early 60s, mid 60s, people still thought extraterrestrials were little green men and combustion engine and all that. He was speculating on ancient astronauts and telepathic interdimensional aliens. And he read the literature. He read, for example, von Daniken's Chariots of the God. He thought that the story of Ezekiel and the wheels, that could be an alien craft. He thought about the book of Enoch. Perhaps the Watchers were aliens. And again, he was sophisticated because he would speculate without taking a stance. So he was more like we are today, except today people take a stance and then try to cancel you if you disagree with them. But he was more So he was, he thought of all these things, and he was a big science fiction guy. He was a Trekkie. His favorite show was Star Trek. He loved science fiction, all that. So again, through the book, you see that UFOs and Elvis are so connected throughout the entire book, with even other instances I bring up.
Yeah, he wasn't alone in those times. I believe people like John Lennon and even Muhammad Ali had talked about seeing or experiencing stuff.
John Lennon did. David Bowie had quite a few. Chris Squire, bass player of Yes. So yeah, there are a lot of instances of rock stars having extraterrestrials. But I think again, Elvis had about 3 or 4. Bowie had quite a few. Those two had the most. And as my next book is about Bowie, and I compare how they had parallel lives.
Yeah, well, definitely. I was also going to ask about this, and then I can actually talk about Bowie for a second. But a lot of pulling on the thread with the UFO thing, there's individuals out there who have experiences, and they talk about receiving a download of information. There's Burroughs in, the UFO event was in the UK. Pembridge. I can't remember exactly where it was. But anyways, this guy, he says he received a download from this craft. Do you think Elvis ever received some kind of download? I mean, could that have been what propelled him really to dig into the esoteric documents, trying to figure out what he was?
I don't know about downloads, more like life instances. I know Burroughs as a child had some extraterrestrials walk into his room, and he was sold as a kid that this was a reality. But with Elvis, I don't think so, because again, he was already born with mystic abilities or supernatural abilities. Got this from his mom. Gladys always claimed she could see dark shadows or shadow men in the distance at night. She had premonitions, all that. Certainly a mystically oriented person and tormented by it. And she had healing abilities. And Elvis certainly adopted these from an early age. He practiced faith healing. He could astral travel. He had visions. But his parents have told him, here in the South, keep that under your hat, soldier. So I think that's what really propelled him. And also, again, the big questions in life, because he had such a harsh childhood. Remember, he grew up in the Great Depression, and it was a place of bone-crunching poverty in the South, regardless of who you were. And he was at the lowest class, as they say. Where he grew up, he was on the wrong side of the tracks. He was a place of bootleggers and sharecroppers, and he often went hungry. He often was homeless. All they had was cornbread and water. So that propelled him to find out why. He wanted to know the why. Why did Jesse die? Why? All these things kept moving. And he was, again, a spiritual oriented person because of growing up in the Pentecostal church, where you just didn't learn about Jesus, but you were meant to experience Jesus every Sunday.
And wasn't it true with Elvis? He felt like he could speak to his twin. Wasn't that a thing?
Definitely a thing.
Okay.
Definitely a thing. Yeah. Once, even though his mother didn't like it, and in fact, I don't think his mother even visited Jesse's grave, he had to sneak there with his father. She did say that how he's with the angels, Jesse became sort of his daemon or higher self, his conscious. Elvis would often say that Jesse would help him make the right decisions in life or pivot to the right places. He did have plenty of dreams with Jesse and visions of Jesse in different ways. Some were very negative, but yeah, Jesse was certainly, you might say, the biggest driver of Elvis's life when it came to both career and spirituality, because as I write in the book, he was what they call now a twinless survivor. And that's obviously people who lose their twins feel they've lost half of themselves, half of their souls. But the same goes with twinless survivors, except you are soaked with what is called a survivor's guilt, because you wonder, how come we were born in the same place, the same process, but you didn't make it and I didn't make it. And these people grow up with a huge void in their life. They want to understand the metaphysics or the fate behind that. So they tend to be seekers, artistic, but unfortunately they also tend to be self-destructive, prone to addiction, and cannot make contact with other people very well, especially the opposite sex. So it's almost like Elvis was fated to be Elvis from the very beginning. And I make other comparisons too of figures like other twinless survivors like Liberace and Philip K. Dick, and you see the same parallel, the same personality, and the same fate, and often the same doom. So that was without any. I mean, Philip K. Dick said the loss of his twin Jane was the primary force in his entire life. Everything he wrote, everything he thought about, always went back to Jane to understand why this had happened. The same with Elvis and Jesse, no doubt.
Yeah, many of Dick's stories actually involve those dualities: twin selves, twin worlds, twin destinies, stuff like that. So it's kind of like if I was looking at Elvis and Jesse, and it's kind of weird to ask, but it's did Jesse pay the price to help Elvis exist as he did? To make Elvis exist as a bridge between worlds.
That's a good point. It is certainly very possible. Certainly very possible. I think, I bring up William Blake losing his brother, became somebody he would talk to as a ghost to help him out. So it certainly is very possible. I mean, we do live in a cosmos where soul energy and blood is really the currency of the multiverse. Somebody has to be sacrificed for something to be created. It's just the way of the universe. So it's certainly a possibility, but Elvis was still seeking why and how can I make this better, and how can I understand what is the universe about and what is my fate in it. So
yeah, you actually often talk about interact with guests of your own on Aeon Byte about Gnostic stuff. So, for example, the gods wear masks, cultures, the cultures that are involved with those myths that kind of are shaped around the masks. But if you take Elvis and then also David Bowie, of course, do you see these two individuals as two archetypes? Like they're playing out something. They're on the stage of life and they're playing something different, deeper than just celebrity.
Oh, for sure. I would say, yeah, definitely archetypal expressions or images of such archetypes with Elvis the King, the trickster. Again, archetypes can be very dynamic and fluid, and they can move through us, and they often destroy the vessel that they use. So you certainly see that with Elvis and Bowie as the trickster archetype, who is the great innovator of mankind, who's also a guide in between worlds or historical events. Again, pre-war America, post-war America, who's the guide into? That's what the trickster does. The trickster brings, of course, technology, information, healing. Tricksters are notorious for also providing music and art to the world. So, and when you see Bowie and how he was pivotal, especially in the 70s when England was going through such a big change, he also proposes that too. Bowie, of course, also is, that bridge between the old ways and the hyper technology that we would get in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, definitely the trickster powers, I would say, are with Elvis and Bowie. And but again, if some have surmised the King too, and you have to watch out because as I mentioned, these archetypes can destroy you if you summon them. Elvis took too much of the King archetype, just as Marilyn Monroe took too much of the Queen archetype. They both stand as the anima and animus of the American psyche, but there was a price to pay for that.
Yeah, it's almost like Elvis, became devoured, if you will, by the archetypes he was dealing with. And then you take someone like David Bowie, and he looks more like an individual who was mastering them, right? You have the king, the Elvis the king, and then you have Bowie the Starman, and so it's kind of, you know, the ultimate question is you take these two people as we're talking about them, and is there evidence that there's an ability that we can take our own narrative? You know, Bowie being maybe a modern Aeon or something like that, but taking our own narrative and making it our own and developing ourselves beyond what we should be.
I think, in the Bowie book, that's kind of the stance I take. That he is showing us the way to the stars. We can all be Major Tom, and there's absolutely nothing with leaving the planet and floating in the void, because that's where you truly will find yourself, your dark night of the soul, your chapel perilous. So, and beyond that, of course, is the ability to become an extraterrestrial, more human than human, which ironically is just being a nice person down here on Earth. That's the irony. That's the journey. I want to be God. And then you come down and you're like, oh, I just want to pet the cat and feed the poor. That's what a God really does. But with Elvis, it's more like, it's twofold. It's, can we avoid our fate and create a destiny? And I leave that as an open question. And what it is to be an American, the power of the American. Today, nobody knows what an American is. Our country's fragmenting. We're going through that same stage that America went in the 50s, except we might be going down to collapse, which happened when Bowie was born. The English Empire just went to shit. We might be at that stage, but if we can understand Elvis as the soul of America, and he truly represented what it is to be an American, then we can perhaps as a people regain our essence and our energy and our healing. So that's sort of the two ways I see it. I mean, Elvis is so high up in some plane that I don't think anybody should even try to imitate or summon him. Although Elvis is one of the things that have brought him a lot of healing was he embraced a sort of Christ consciousness in the inner Christ. And I think that's what helped guided him and brought him healing and understanding through much of his life. So I think that's what every reader should be able to get, that this is the Christ archetype that is certainly available to all of us. It won't destroy us. This is the one archetype that is meant to fulfill us.
The one to make us human, right?
Right.
I mean, in the Gnostic world, we see that truth is often seen as an inversion, right? So Elvis was surrounded by, you know, we were talking about this blue light. So he was surrounded by light, but, you know, ultimately he felt lost in maybe a darker world. And then we take someone like Bowie, who took that darkness and he seemed to find a level of clarity. And so if I were to ask, you know, do you find that inversion, that truth inversion is the path to insight, or maybe in some individuals, the path to madness?
Well, I think the story is, as a shaman, you are meant to go to the spirit world and the underworld for those treasures. It's, you know, what Jordan Peterson says, you know, you go to the dragon cave, you're afraid to look at the dragon, but he has a treasure, so you got to face that dragon. And in mystery religions, you go down and you meet either archons or Hades demons, and they tear you apart. You know, the story of Osiris, that is shamanistic. In many cultures, the shaman goes down to the underworld and he gets torn apart, and it's so painful. But he gets put together with a new body, and he gets the gifts, the powers, and all that. So that's the story. And as some have said, we're all shamans in training. We all have that ability, and we all have to go to the underworld to face our shadow, face our demons, or to face the demons of our ancestors or our nation. So it's all there, and it's very painful. It's very ego destructive, and often you got to do it more than once. With Bowie, I don't see even something good, because we have to remember that in the 70s, Bowie went completely insane and he went into some dark, horrible places. He was addicted to drugs. He was embracing National Socialism. He was doing Nazi magic and, the really dark magic. And he just went crazy. But part of it, he knew that this was a purgation of his dark forces. But people like Elvis and Bowie kind of have, they tend to make it very public because everybody's looking at them. So,
well, I mean, that's all part of the integration process. You have to integrate the shadow, and what it sounds like is Bowie grabbed that and tried to basically choke the life out of it. If we were to look at specifically, the world being kind of an illusion, Philip K. Dick, Gnosticism, etc. The world's this illusion. It's here, the demiurges, etc. The whole Gnostic thing. But when something is real, like real, in Gnosticism, do we find that Elvis was more actualized in being real, or Bowie?
Well, there's levels of reality, so it's hard to tell. What is real? Yeah, that's a famous Morpheus quote. What is real? What we see, what we touch. So obviously Elvis and Bowie, through their views and influences of Yogananda, Tibetan Buddhism. Bowie was, of course, very big into Burroughs and bought his Gnostic mythology. The whole thing from the, mind parasites to, all this other horrible stuff. And again, with Elvis and Yogananda, that yes, there is an illusionary world, but it's a question you have to wonder: am I part of a grand, primal, unified, undivided consciousness that has diluted itself and dropped into this world for some adventure? Am I here trapped because of some evil entity, oppressive archon, or maybe I chose to be here? That's the question. And I think both knew, yes, it is an illusion. We are all ripples of an original consciousness. But like all of us, they both struggled and tweaked and changed their speculation at different parts of their life, but they both certainly had this sort of Gnostic thrust or view of the world. And I mean, Elvis certainly read Gnostic Gospels. I've seen his own handwriting, quoting the Gospel of Thomas, so he was familiar with that tradition.
And then, if we talk about these two guys, their ultimate end. I mean, Bowie died a handful of years ago, I believe, and I don't remember what year it was that Elvis passed, but, can we talk about, how was it that Elvis he ended up dying?
Oh, well, isn't that the $1 million question? That's we might as well talk about JFK's assassination, because sure. It is a maze. It is a rabbit hole. It's so fascinating. The different theories, conspiracies, and some are valid, some are not. I mean, I don't think he faked his death. I think that's out of the question. I do think that his material form did end, but I do think he's around in some spectrum or dimensional level, and he's obviously appearing. He's making appearances. He's been very busy since 1977. He continues to appear. If you go to the Graceland website right now, they have a dedicated page for Elvis apparitions. So he's still around. But there's so many. Oh my God, there's so many conspiracies in there. So much fun. I deal with some of them in the book and debunk of some of the others. Like there's a story that He used to call himself John Burroughs. That was his alias when he would go to hotels so he wouldn't start a riot. So there was a John Burroughs that took a flight from Memphis to Buenos Aires. I don't know why he was going there. Was he going to meet the Nazis? Who knows? But that was a big conspiracy, except the only problem is in 1977, there was no flight from the Memphis airport to Buenos Aires. So that got debunked. And there's so many others that he's appeared. I mean, there's some that are great, like he appears in Home Alone 1, and you see the mom's at the counter, and there's a guy behind her. The guy looks like Elvis, and all these other ones, they're great.
Yeah, I think the biggest story that I had read is he died in the bathroom. And that's kind of an interesting one because there's like this, if this is the case, right? He died, having a heart attack on the toilet or something. There's a Sumerian god or demon known as Sulak. And that was like his thing is that's how they explain, death in the toilet demon is Sulak, took the person, right? And so it's kind of like, how do you explain this away? You can have a heart attack while trying to pass a number 2. So
it happened to a guy in The Sopranos. I can't forget the episode. Yeah, and of course I deal. As I show in the book, he knew he was going to die. In fact, he predicted his death. He told his stepbrother when he was going to pass. He was definitely dropping very powerful hints that his time was up, changing documents like his will and all that. So I think he knew, in the whole ritual that day, I break it down as some shamanistic ceremonial funerary rite, from the song he was playing to the magic he was using to his last book was about the face of Jesus, which is very symbolical. Like the last thing he saw was try to see Jesus face to face. And even the toilet thing, that's the throne motif, the king must fall and all that. But you can dissect it so many ways and have different interpretations. Because if some have said, when you look at the Graceland bathroom, he also had a barber chair in that room. And that was his favorite place of reading, because Elvis was never alone. Even in his bedroom, he couldn't be alone because he was a terrible sleepwalker. So if he didn't have his girlfriend or his fiancée there, he had to have a doctor, a nurse come and wake him up, check on him every half an hour, because he almost died a few times sleepwalking, like off of a building and all that. So the bathroom was the one place where he could read in peace, meditate, and just kind of relax and be alone. That was it. So, and the barber chair was his favorite place to go. And there are contradicting stories. Some say at first, like Ginger Alden said, his pants were down to his ankles. But then others said, no, they were folded on the floor. Well, never human interpretation, especially at such a shocking revelation, is very hard. So we don't know. But then again, of course, it's a very titillating story that if he was murdered by Colonel Parker or somebody in his organization, or he pissed off the mafia, what's the one thing that mobsters like to do? Kill you in the bathroom, because it's a humiliation ritual. And there are many examples. Men, they wait for you to be in the bathroom and then they gun you down or choke you there, because they're leaving a message to the world. Don't F with us. And there were rumors that Elvis wanted to leave RCA and he was tired of the colonel. A colonel was mob connected. RCA was run by the mafias. And he was in Vegas. He was always rubbing shoulders with both feds and mobsters. So anyway, fascinating, but your guess is as good as mine right now.
That's why you say there's a big conspiracy about it. Yeah, I just go off with a simple thing: is he died in the bathroom. That's easy peasy for me. Mm-hmm. Whatever happened, absolutely. You're right. There's definitely some kind of throne motif here. It makes it into a mythical ritual passing, as opposed to dying asleep in the bedroom or of an overdose of drugs or something like that. This changes the scenario a little bit.
Yeah, I think in, was it 2027? His father, Vernon, said we cannot release the autopsy until 2027. So we might know in 2 years, unless his family gets in the way.
Right.
So because the toxicology reports and all, there's so much chaos in it. And again, they are sealed. So we really don't know how, was it a heart attack, an overdose, or we don't know.
Right. Fair enough. Well, as we're wrapping up, we can talk about Bowie for a few minutes. Tell me what's going on in that avenue and what you're looking at there.
Yeah, it certainly is Bowie. First the Elvis. I became quantum entangled with Elvis, and he invaded me, and I had to write that book. I I don't think I had much of a choice, or else when you say no to the gods or the spirits, the alternative is never good. So I had to write this book. It's taken a huge toll. But then as soon as I finished this book, I'm like, oh, I never want to write another biography in my entire life or any of my lives. But this other voice king said, no, you forgot about Elvis 2.0. And it was Bowie. I mean, they're the same figure. It's uncanny. And Bowie, again, as I write, also had his incredible adventure as a shaman, as an extraterrestrial, as the manifestation of so many powerful archetypes. And Elvis wanted his story to be told that the world has missed, even though it's all available. You tell for your listeners all the information about Elvis and his supernatural abilities, beliefs, UFOs. I took it from mainstream lauded, copy edited biographies from very sober historians, from Priscilla, Memphis Mafia. It's all there from these biographies that have sold millions, that have been around for 40 years, some of them. And all the 90% of the instances, Elvis was not alone. There were witnesses watching him manipulate the weather, heal people, move objects, all these things, do meditation. So it's all there, and that's what he wanted me to get together. With Bowie's more like, what did he say? He says, I'm in pain, and there's part of me that wants the world to know that I have a message. And I think this message is also relevant for the healing of not just the United States, but the entire world. Bowie's a little bit more global and galactic.
He was the Starman.
Yeah.
Fantastic. You can plug your own podcast, your own stuff, and we can wrap it up.
Sure. It's my website's easy. It's just my name, as they're seeing on the screen, miguelconner.com, all lowercase. And there are many paths. There's paths to my Aeon Byte podcast and all the Gnostic stuff, but there's also links to the Elvis book. You can get it Kindle, audio, physical. I also have links to my Substack, where I'm also blogging about Elvis and Bowie and finding much more information about the King and the Starman that's not even in the book, and then the usual suspects, social media, contact forms,
Right, fantastic. Yeah, links are in the show notes. Miguel Conner, as always, it's a pleasure to talk with you.
Enjoyed it as always.
Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. You can also donate on my website. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.
Strange thing about television is that it doesn't tell you everything. It shows you everything about life on Earth. True mysteries remain. Perhaps it's in the nature of television. Just waves in space.